Hey everyone, and welcome back. Okay, let's just dive right into things. Today, we're getting into a deeply chilling rural folklore explainer, and it's basically a masterclass in grief, dark magic, and a vengeance that, well, literally refuses to die. We're unpacking the story of the resurrection of Kaali, a cursed legacy. Now, as someone who absolutely loves breaking down the nuts and bolts of these dark folktales, I find this one so fascinating because it shows how past sins can quite literally form the foundation for present-day horrors. It's like a giant, terrifying puzzle. We're gonna map out exactly how a forgotten tragedy claws its way back into the light. So, settle in and let's unravel this whole shebang together.
Now, what is buried beneath your house? It's a pretty terrifying thought, right? I mean, imagine pouring your life savings into a brand new home, looking for a fresh start, only to realize that the earth right beneath your floorboards is hiding a dark, rotting secret. Imagine that the very ground you're walking on every single day is cursed. That is the exact nightmare we're exploring today. It's a visceral, honestly horrifying reminder that sometimes the past just flat out refuses to stay buried.
So, let's get into Chapter 1, The 3 a.m. Haunting, featuring Kishore and Sarla. Okay, so Kishore and Sarla are just your totally ordinary couple. They've recently moved into this newly built house in a village called Fulwa. But you know, they aren't just there for a change of scenery. They're actually running from some profound grief after the really tragic loss of their only son. So they're vulnerable, right? They're desperately searching for peace. But on literally their second night in the house, at exactly 3 a.m., which as we know is classic witching hour territory, Sarla is jolted awake. Something falls outside her room, and then she hears it. The slow, deliberate, metallic clinking of anklets out in the courtyard. She wakes Kishore up, absolutely terrified, and looking through the window, she doesn't see a normal person. She sees this looming shadow of a woman with glowing red eyes just standing there in the pitch black. The figure silently gestures for Sarla to come closer, and then suddenly, boom, the shadow is completely engulfed in terrifying flames.
Sarla wakes up screaming. It was a nightmare, or so she thinks. Kishore tries to comfort her, telling her it's just a bad dream. But these visions, they start escalating fast. The very next afternoon, Sarla hears this massive commotion outside. She steps out and finds her husband, Kishore, digging up the courtyard dirt like an absolute madman with these strange, guttural growls coming out of his throat. In this horrific waking vision, the sky turns pitch black, a blood-red moon hangs right overhead, and dogs just start howling everywhere. Kishore turns to look at her, and blood is literally pouring from his eyes. His face is twisted into something monstrous. And then a rotting hand bursts up from the dirt, grabs Kishore by the throat, and a terrifying voice echoes this chilling demand. "Free me, or both of you will die."
Which brings us to Chapter 2, Unearthing the Cursed Idol, and a truly dark discovery. Pushed to the absolute brink of terror by these recurring nightmares, Sarla comes to this chilling realization. There is something buried in that courtyard. And you know, desperation pushes people toward ancient solutions. So Sarla decides to fall back on some old folk magic passed down from her mother to test the grounds for evil energy. It's basically a three-step process. Step 1, she places 3 ordinary lemons in the dirt of the courtyard. Step 2, she waits for a reaction from any lingering dark energy. And step 3, well, the results are immediate and absolutely horrifying. Within moments, those bright yellow lemons turn completely pitch black, and these start releasing this overwhelming, terrible smell of rot. The folk magic basically confirms her absolute worst fears. There is a deeply sinister presence right there, right beneath their feet.
At this point, completely unable to control her fear, Sarla grabs a shovel that very same night and just starts digging into the courtyard herself. Eventually, her shovel strikes something hard. With trembling hands, she pulls up what looks like this really old goddess idol. And in a moment of, honestly, tragic relief, she whispers, "So this was a divine sign." But here's the thing, she is entirely wrong. The actual second she lifts that statue, thick black smoke just starts pouring out of it, and it shoots directly into Sarla's body. Instantly, her eyes turn this bright, unnatural red, and a really strange, sinister smile just creeps right across her face.
All right, Chapter 3, The Witch of Fulwa, where we uncover Kaali's origins.
By the next morning, Sarla is fundamentally a different person. When Kishore tries to touch that strange idol she dug up, she violently swats his hand away and snarls, "Don't touch her." Terrified by his wife's sudden and super dark transformation, Kishore actually goes to find an old village tantric priest for help. And guys, the priest turns completely pale when he hears the story. He reveals that this idol, it's no goddess. It's the vengeful spirit of a woman named Kaali. Now, to understand what's happening now, we have to look at how this curse was built up over generations. Years ago, Kaali was a young woman right there in Pulwa. She felt deeply in love with the village chief's son, and he actually promised to marry her. But the chief flat out refused the union simply because Kaali was from a poor, lower caste family. So the son was married off to someone else. Heartbroken and just absolutely consumed by hatred, Kaali retreated to the forests and the graveyards. She mastered dark black magic specifically to get her revenge. Sometime later, after a really terrifying showdown, she was defeated, and that old village graveyard was eventually paved right over to make way for new homes. Which, of course, brings us right back to the present day, where Kishore and Sarla unwittingly move into one of those brand new houses.
But we need to look closer at the sheer scale of Kaali's fury before she was finally stopped. Her heartbreak triggered a massive wave of devastation. I mean, she unleashed literal plagues upon Pulwa. We're talking mass animal deaths, crops completely destroyed overnight, rampant diseases sweeping through the population, and some really mysterious, unexplainable deaths, which, by the way, included the village chief's son and his new wife. The village was basically being systematically eradicated by her dark magic.
Eventually, she was cornered in her hut by an angry mob and the village chief himself. Kaali actually nearly killed the chief using this invisible magical chokehold. It was only the sudden arrival of that old tantric priest who threw some enchanted water on her that finally broke her spell. As she weakened, the desperate villagers actually poured petrol all around her hut and set it ablaze. But even as the flames were literally consuming her, she screamed this chilling promise: "I will return, and this village will suffer because of me. Remember my words."
Now, even after her physical body was totally destroyed, Kaali's vengeful spirit stuck around. To stop her for good, the tantric priest had to perform this desperate binding ritual. He took the actual literal ashes of Kaali's burned body, crafted them into a statue, and buried it deep underground near the old graveyard. And here's the horrifying realization that hits Kishore like a ton of bricks. The village had changed over the years. The old graveyard had been completely leveled and paved over. Kishore and Sarla had built their brand new dream home exactly on top of where that cursed ash statue was buried.
This takes us into Chapter 4, the blood sacrifices, as Sarla becomes fully possessed. Now that we understand the terrifying history, let's fast forward back into the chaotic present. Because Sarla is no longer the grieving, terrified wife we met at the beginning. Nope, the spirit of Kaali has completely taken the wheel, and she is demanding a terrifying toll from the village. Think about the contrast here. Before, Sarla was weakened by years of grief, terrified of her own shadow, barely even able to walk properly. But Sarla possessed? No way. She has glowing red eyes, she commands this horrifying supernatural strength, and she is actively performing dark, ancient rituals. In fact, she actually uses this new power to convince the frightened villagers that a goddess has appeared. She tricks them into worshipping the cursed idol to supposedly protect the village from the sudden animal killings that, surprise, surprise, have started happening all over again. The really gruesome reality of all this worship is discovered by Kishore one night. He opens the door to their storeroom and is met with a scene straight out of an absolute nightmare. The floor is just slick with animal blood. Raw meat is piled up right in front of the ash idol. There's an upside-down swastika drawn on the ground, and Sarla is just standing there, chanting these horrifying mantras, getting ready to sacrifice a tied-up goat. When Kishore screams at her that the idol is evil, she lunges. The woman who could barely walk just days ago effortlessly grabs her husband by the throat and lifts a grown man completely into the air with just one hand. Okay, Chapter 5, Trial by Fire, the final stand. Kishore barely manages to escape that storeroom with his life, and he sprints straight to the old tantric priest. Armed with the terrifying truth about the ash statue, Kishore, a loyal friend of his, and the old priest all rush back to the house to stop these dark rituals once and for all. They burst through the door and find Sarla, eyes completely glowing red, preparing yet another sacrifice. The old priest immediately starts chanting his binding mantras, but Sarla, she just throws her head back and lets out this booming, incredibly unnatural laugh. Through her, Kaali's spirit speaks directly to the priest, saying, "You trapped me once before, but this time I will not lose." And with a mere wave of her hand, Sarla throws the priest entirely across the room. Kishore bravely tries to jump in, but his possessed wife just hurls him violently against a solid wall. The impact is brutal. Kishore is killed instantly.
Okay, so let's look at how this all ends, because the thematic structure here is just incredibly poetic. Despite bleeding heavily from the throw, and despite Kaali's spirit using telekinesis to twist his body around like a rag doll, the old priest absolutely refuses to stop chanting his mantras. And those relentless holy words finally pierce through the dark magic, giving Sarla one incredibly brief, agonizing moment of clarity. Seeing her dead husband lying there, she weeps and says, "This all started because of me. I must end it." Using literally every last ounce of her remaining willpower, Sarla crawls over to the cursed ash statue, scoops it up into her arms, and throws herself directly into the raging, sacred ritual fire. It's a perfect loop. The curse of Kaali was born in the flames of a burning hut, and it ends in the flames of a sacrificial fire. These terrifying screams shake the whole house, and then just absolute silence.
So the horrific ordeal seems to be over, right? But I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought. If fire originally destroyed the witch, which created the very ashes that held her spirit, and now fire has destroyed the idol, is the curse of Kaali truly broken? Or has the cycle just simply reset? Is her dark, vengeful spirit just waiting patiently in the ashes once again? It's a seriously chilling detail, and it reminds us that some legacies just refuse to burn away. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Take care, everyone, and seriously, watch where you step,